Hello, and welcome to Excel Highway, your one-stop shop for all your Excel needs. Today's video is sponsored by Connecteam. In today's video, I want to share with you how I built an employee scheduling system you can use on Google Sheets. Using Google Sheets makes this file a centralized platform where you and your employees can share data. You can create shifts, your employees can reserve those shifts, plan vacations, and more. The file is comprised of 4 sheets. Employees. This is your team's database, where you can convert their email into a name and picture, as you see here. More data columns can be added, like department, skill, etc. In this example, I'm converting an email to a full name and a picture. That's it. Vacations. In the vacations sheet, you can update national holidays over here and store your employees' personal vacations. Shift database. This backend sheet stores data for your shifts, holding the shift data to be presented and used in the main shift sheet. Open sheet is the main sheet. This shows the weekly schedule. It's your main sheet where you can use the buttons and schedule your business needs. Let's start deep diving into how this was built step by step. Get things started with the employee sheet. So I'm using the email address as an identification to allow multiple users to work on the file. This sheet will translate an email to a full name and a picture to be inserted in the open sheet. It's a pretty simple and basic table. The only tricky part is adding a picture. To do that, click on the cell, click on Insert, Image, Insert Image in Cell, and then you could have person appearing in this icon. You can, of course, put real pictures here. Once you do that, it'll be moved over here in the open sheet. Vacations sheet, columns A through C will be updated once you click on the vacation button in the open sheet. We're going to cover that later. In this sheet, what you need to update are columns E through G. For national holidays, just add the holiday name, from and to, and that's it. Eventually, you'll see in the open sheet that the people or the national holidays within those dates will appear as gray cells so that you remember not to book them. Shift database. Columns A through D are updated based on the buttons pressed in the open sheet, and it's best not to make any changes here. This will show every update that you make when you create a new shift, when you book someone, when you remove. Column E shows the text in the open sheet. It's a concatenation of the shift name and time. There is a char 10 between both texts. That's just going to generate a line space. As you can see, I have morning shift as the first row, and no matter what the length is, I have a space, and then the second text, which is the time. Of course, you can change that to custom fit your needs, and if you have more columns in the future, you can adjust. Column F will show the event running number per date and employee or open shifts. I'm using COUNTIFs with a $sign. This is used to dynamically generate the shift names in the right place in OpenSheet. I will show that later. All you need to remember is that this will be a counter for a specific date, for a specific employee name, or the open shifts. So there are 2 open shifts for this date. There are 3 open shifts for that date. And here there's 1 for that specific employee. So we're going to use that to populate the open shift. That's going to tell us how many rows we need to allocate for each employee. The last column over here is the previous week to open sheet. This column checks if this line's data was the previous week of what's selected in the open sheet. And this will enable us to click on the copy from last week button. I'm using that to filter those lines. You can look at the formula. It's an if combined with an and. So I'm checking if the date, which is cell A, if it's both greater or equal to open G2, which is the first date, we didn't talk about it yet, through the last date, which is M2. And -7, because I want to see if it's the previous week of today. If both conditions apply, it's going to be a yes, otherwise it's going to be a no. Today's video is sponsored by Connecteam. I want to show you their amazing job scheduling platform. Let's jump into the app. So I'm using the desktop version, which is the manager's view. Mind you, the employees are going to access the app through their mobile phone. So here I'm going to check the job scheduling feature, access schedule, and we can see, for example, this week's schedule, Monday through Sunday. It's already set up. You can see me and my employees, Jessica, Joe, and Samantha, the different shifts, and if someone is not available. Let me show you how easy it is to create new shifts. I'll start a new week. Click here on the shifts without users. I can call this one project plan, for example, and select the job. You can see each job has its own color, and you can change that, of course. I'm going to enable users to claim that shift and click on publish. And I have this shift right here. I can also duplicate the shift, and I can also mass duplicate. And I can just move this around. What's also nice is that within the shift itself, there are other aspects that I can add. For example, the location. I can type a location. I can also add notes, and I can also add attachments like images, file, or shortcuts, which people can see on their phones. Now, once I move the shift to someone, I'll just go back to this week. Once I assign someone to a shift, they're going to get a notification after I click the publish, like so. So the shifts are booked, and they're going to get a notification on their mobile phone that I booked them. Once they get that notification, they can either confirm or decline the shift, which of course you can have action items and follow-ups on that. This is how the app looks like when you get a notification of a new shift. And this is an example of a shift that I got. You can see I have some details, attachments, and I can either accept or reject, and everybody will see. Now, what's also nice, as you can see as I move things around, is that the shift, number of shifts, that's the number here, and the hours update. So you can see as I move things around, it changes, so you can see the workload for a certain person. You can also add unavailability of people, just like this one over here. So I click on add and availability. It could be a certain date, maybe just a few hours, 9 through 1, and let's mark it for Jessica and save the unavailability. So you see now you can see that they're not available. If you're looking for a great app to manage your business needs, try Connecteam. Please use my affiliate link in the description. You can start for free. Open sheet. This is the main sheet and also the most complicated one, so I left it for last. I'll start with the sheet layout and finish with the app scripts used for the buttons. There are some hidden columns over here, A through D. These will help us populate the entire schedule. Column A is checking which employees or open shifts this line is related to. You start with 0, which is always the open shift, and then increases by 1 every time the number of lines reaches the maximum per employee. So, as you can see, if the previous line is greater than the number of lines, I'm adding 1, otherwise it's the same employee. So essentially, if I know that I have 2 lines for open, that's why it stays with number 0. Column B increases by 1 every time and goes back to 1 when a new employee line. So you start off with 1 and it goes up until it's a new employee, and then it goes back to 1. Column C shows the number of lines for the employee within the date range. This is done by using max ifs. Max ifs is a combination of a lot of conditions for a certain column. So I'm looking for the maximum value of column F, which is the date counter, but I want to make sure that column D, which is the employee email, is D4, which is the employee email or open shift, and column A, which is the date, is greater or equal to the first day of the week and less than equal to the last day of the week. So essentially this is going to give me that last number, number 2 in this case, or number 3 for this case. So that gives me the number of lines per employee. Last, I'm using offset for column D to show the email address of that employee based on the employee number in column A and the employee table. So now I know that I'm on employee 0, which means open, and I'm using offset. Offset will return a reference table or range based on my instructions. So I'm offsetting based on employee A2, so I'm starting over here. And I only want to go X amount of rows, as in here. Everything else I don't change, so it just basically goes down as the number changes. Column E and F are VLOOKUPs from the employee table. Just a simple VLOOKUP with an if error. So if error, return blank, because I just want it to be blank, nicely invisible. So those were columns A through D, which are going to help us populate everything here. Column G1 is where you set the date of the week. It doesn't have to be the Monday, it could be any day of that week, and you will still get everything for that week. G2 is going to extract the Monday of that week, and it's doing it using this method: G1 minus weekday G1, comma 2 plus 2. This will give you the Monday of that date. The other cells are just going to reference column the day before them plus 1. So you always have Monday through Sunday. And you have the day of the week as a fixed text over here. G4 through M however many rows you want here, is going to populate the text of the shift. How is it achieved? I'm using filter. So I'm using the filter function with a few conditions. I'm going to filter column E, which is the text that I generated. For dates, the date has to be this date. Column A in the shift is the date. Column D is the name of the person, or the email, sorry. So column D equals D4, and column F equals B4. That's the running number. So it's always going to give me just one value, depending on the number of rows. And if nothing is found, then return blank, like so. And that's how you get all these shifts being populated. I also want to show over here to the right some more hidden columns. Added columns here for the vacation days. I'm going to use that for the conditional formatting. So to check if this day is a condition, I have a double count ifs. The first count ifs is looking over here, and I'm basically counting the number of times the employee and the date is between those two. So count A equals D4, which is the name, the username, user email. Column B is less than G2, which is the reference date, and column C is greater or equal to G2. So this date is between those vacation dates. And I'm doing the same for the national holiday. So essentially you get a number between 0 and 1, and if it's going to be 1, we're going to color it in gray over here. Let's take a look at the conditional formatting. You see here 3 different colors: gray for vacation, blue for open shift, and green for employee shift. So go to Format, Conditional Formatting, and I have 4 conditions. The first one, if N4, which is those hidden columns, equals 1, then 1 or 0, and color it in gray. So N4 is going to match G4, and each will have their own mirror cell for the vacation. If the cell is empty, I don't want anything, because I want these to be blank. If the name here is D and D4 is open, color it in blue. And if it's not empty, then color it in green. So first it checks if it's open. If it's not the name open, then it will color it in green. So those are the 4 conditional formatting that compile this. Now the next step is to learn all of these buttons, which basically just let you work much quicker and easier with the Google Sheets. You can do the same thing manually by going here and making the adjustments, but this is supposed to be more user-friendly and allow multiple users to work on it. So first of all, how do you even create a button? If you're not familiar with that, click on Insert, Drawing. Here you'd have some sort of shape, some sort of an image. You could search for, I don't know, photo. Just put that. And you can add a text. Take photo. Save and close. And now this is an image, and each image you have those 3 dots. You click on them, assign script, and then you can just add your script and assign it. this case, that script doesn't exist, so I get this error. That's how you create all of them. Let's start looking at the code. The code app script exists in Google here in extensions, app scripts. And these are all the functions that I use over here. I have a main function that I call scheduled that's looking for an input or text string. And it will perform a few actions that will help for different causes. Roughly the code will be the same, but there's a few nuances. That's why I'm providing a text to differentiate. So I'm going to open, so basically this is going to help with the reserve delete and add shift. So we can see what this is with the sign script. This would be book event. This would be release event. This would be new shift. So let's start with book event, which is this one, right? Reserve employee. Reserve employee, basically what it will do, you hover over a shift, an open shift, sorry. Well, you could do it also for non-open, but it would make more sense for open shift. You click on reserve employee, it identifies the email of the person working on the file, and it will reserve that shift to them. So they would move from open shifts into that person's shifts. Okay, how does it work? So this is the main function called schedule. So selection, spreadsheet, get active spreadsheet, get selection. That's going to return what we selected. In essence, the cell that we're selecting. Event will return the value itself. Selection, get current cell, get value. Email, session, get effective users, get email. That's going to bring us the email of the person using the file. If input equals open, like in this case, email equals open because we won't have any email. If I'm creating a new shift, it's going to be a new shift. Find the matching row for the event. So I want to see here in database which row I am, because I want to change the employee email. So first of all, I'm declaring that database sheet is a spreadsheet named shift database by this method. Spreadsheet app, get active spreadsheet, get shift by name shift database, which is this, and open will be the second parameter called open sheet. Just an easier way to reference them. Range data, that's going to be the range data in database sheet. Last row, going to get the last row of that database sheet in that method. R and C for row and column, so R equals the row that I am in, selection get current cell, which row am I, for example, row 4 in column I, which is 9. So these will return where I'm at from column and row perspective. Then I have the date. So the date is the new date, and I want to get the value of the current date, right? So I'm referencing row number 2 in the column that I'm in. So it's going to give me that date. I want an integer date, so to speak, without any time, without any mistakes. So here's how I do that, and I use date to set hours at 0000. So that ignores the time. Another date in database date. Number, that's going to be used later on. That's the number of the row. So number is open sheet, get range, row to get value. So that's the second column. That's going to give me this number. I'm going to use those just to understand where I'm at here. And now I have a loop. That loop is going to go through all the rows in the database sheet. Okay, starting from row number 1, but I'm going for the opposite direction because one of the actions that's going to be performed here is to delete a line. So when you delete lines, what usually happens is if you were in line number 7 and you deleted it, you're jumping to line number 9 next time because this becomes 7. So what's always good to do is when you delete things is go from the bottom, because if you delete number 7, it has no impact on 1 through 6. So that's why I did it like this. So J is last row minus 1, J, operate until J is greater than 1, and J minus minus. So now here's how I'm checking if it's the same text, date, and counter. Getting the value from the database sheet column, first column, right, the date. Again, converting it to a date without time, and I'm checking the gap. And I use this method because I just had some issues when the date was the same, but for some reason it showed a gap. So I'm just using that. It was a bulletproof way to do it. So I'm checking what the gap is between the dates in the database and the date that I have in the cell that I'm in, and then I have an if with 3 conditions. The event, which is the selection itself, the text. It's this. This is the event. This is the cell that I'm looking at. I'm looking if that text is equal to this one. So that's why you see J5. Get value. That's going to return that value in that column. And number is for 6. So number is for the date counter. And number we saw, that's column 2 in the open sheet. And the gap is 0. If all 3 are okay, that means we have a match. Then I'm just going to check if the input is delete or not. If this text is delete, meaning remove shift, I'm going to go ahead and delete that row. Otherwise, I'm just going to update the value of the email to the new person that was assigned to. So real quick, how this, again, schedule works. It pulls the data from whatever cell you're on, and then it's just going to check if there are matches to the database sheet. Once there are, it's going to update the database sheet. All right, so that works for closed, open, and delete. And you see the differences between open changes the email, and delete will delete the line in the database. So those are the buttons that help with book event, with new shift, sorry, not new shift, book event, release event, which is the remove employee, and remove shift over here. Right, those 3 buttons work on the same base code, just a difference. And that's good coding because then you don't have to make a lot of changes. Add shift, this is the new shift. Let's take a look at how that works. So new shift, that's a bit different because as you saw, I have a prompt where I ask the user to input data. So when you click on the add shift, you get this pop-up message, enter a shift name and the date and the time. and it should populate a new shift here. The remove shift, we'll just remove that shift, and the reserve employee, as we talked about, we'll book that person. The remove employee will remove that person from that shift. If I didn't explain that better before, so now you should know. So how does remove shift work? I am again using the database sheet and looking for the last row. Then I have the three questions: shift name, shift code, and start and end time. That's how you build the prompt. So you use UI, this command, then you can just use functions and UI.prompt. So I'm getting three inputs. Now the last row plus one, that's going to just add another row to the database. So database get range, last row, and those four columns, set value, shift date, shift time, shift name, and get response text will return whatever was inputted. So essentially it's just going to fill in columns 1 through 4 on the last row. Last thing I do is I copy the formulas, those three formulas, to that specific row. So copy E through G to the last row, column 5. That's it, very simple. Two more pieces of code here. Let's take a look at report vacation. So when you click on report vacation, it asks you for the start date, and the end date. And notice it's not asking for your email or anything. It just identifies your email and immediately marks you as a vacation, plus adds it here. How does it work? So again, to get the email using this method with the session get effective user, this will give us the email. Database sheet, last row, trick, same thing exactly with the UI, getting two prompts for start and end date and assigning the value. So essentially this is exactly what it did over here. Only the difference is another sheet and different questions. So if you understood that, you understood this, and setting the value with the email and the two responses. Last button that we have here, which is nice, which is copy the last week's shift. So if I shift to this already has shifts, but if I shift another week, don't have anything. I click on this. I'm expecting this to copy the shifts from the previous week, as you now see that they start to populate. And how this works is very simple. It just finds the rows with the yes in the last column. So remember this column we talked about before, this changes dynamically whenever you change the date. So as usual, database sheet range data in last row, and I'm looping from the beginning. If the value here is yes, this means I want to duplicate that line, but a week in advance, remember, because this is going to be a previous week. So the current date, that's the value of that line in column A. Next date, again, I want a date. I want to make sure it's a date that doesn't have a time. So I'm using this code. Next date, set date, current date, plus 7. And then everything is just as is. So columns A through D over there are going to be the date and the two values similar to the values that I've just found, plus the open for the employee name. And lastly, I'm copying the formulas all the way there. And adding another row to the last row because I'm in the loop. So gotta make sure that I don't forget to do that. Okay, so those are all the buttons that are built in the file. So quick recap, this spreadsheet allows you to use a scheduling system to work with many people. You can reserve them into they can reserve themselves. Each user can access this and reserve their times. They can remove. Of course, you can block this. I mean, you could add like passwords that will block certain features from people to use. They could only do a reserved, or they can only. I'm guessing, yeah. So you'd have like an admin that could do everything, and the other employees could only reserve and report vacation. So they can reserve and remove. You can add a shift or remove a shift. You can copy shift from last week. By the way, you have these tooltips, just a note that I added so you have more information what each button does. Employees is where you build the database of your employees. Vacations is where you build the vacations, and this is stored from the button itself. And Shift database keeps track of everything that you do. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will catch you next time.